Today, we are going to be talking about Brandon Bailey and his possible role in Resident Evil 9. This video will be divided into two sections. First, the lore on Brandon Bailey so you know everything about the character. Then, the theory section where we connect the dots to Resident Evil 9. I then talk about why Brandon's story works more so than any other theory I have. It just makes too much sense to not include him. By the end of this video, you should know everything about Brandon Bailey, the proud scientist who lost everything. Nobody knows exactly when Brandon was born. He studied viruses at a university in Switzerland in the 60s with Dr. Marcus, who was his teacher and later his friend. Marcus was part of a secret group of powerful people who also studied biology and eugenics. Thanks to Marcus, Bailey joined this group. Its members were James Marcus, Oswald Spencer, and Edward Ashford, alongside a few other people. In 1966, Bailey, Marcus, and Spencer went on a trip to Africa. They were looking for a special plant. They thought this plant had a special property that can produce a virus that could be used for eugenics. After 3 months of research and under constant threat of some of the locals, they found the plant that produced the virus and named it Progenitor. The next day, they went back to Europe with samples of this virus. When they returned, things changed very quickly, as Dr. Marcus was accused of lying about his research and was kicked out of the university. This forced the group to move their work to Spencer's lab at his home. Through research, they discovered the progenitor virus could fix damaged cells, but they needed to find out how to make the plant produce more of the virus within it at a faster rate. But money started to become an issue. Seeing an opportunity, Spencer proposed they start a company to get more money for their research, Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. The others agreed, and in 1967, Umbrella was born.
Umbrella?
What? What was Umbrella doing?
The group split up the virus samples to work on them separately. Bailey worked with Marcus. Research was slow for Bailey and Marcus, and in 1968, Spencer suggested that the two of them go back to Africa for the plant, as a larger sample could make their work go a lot faster. Brandon and Marcus decided to go to Africa, but they had to prepare the site first, because the first time the three of them went to Africa for the plant, they ran into a lot of trouble with the local tribe. They knew the tribe weren't just going to let them have the plant and take control of the area. Marcus and Brandon hired soldiers overseas to take control of the plant. In about a month, they learned the soldiers were successful, and Brandon alone left for Africa. Yes, Marcus didn't go with him because Spencer had arranged for Marcus to teach at a school in the United States, a trick to separate Bailey and Marcus to take more power for himself. In Africa, Bailey looked over the creation of the lab in the caverns. The lab was designed to get progenitor samples a lot faster and send them over to Umbrella. Without Marcus, Brandon had no distractions and became obsessed with his work. Brandon focused on finding the right conditions to make the virus. He also regained communication with Marcus, who was working on a separate project called the T-Virus. In the late 1980s, after 20 years of work, Brandon finally figured out how to make the virus at a decent rate. Around the same time, he was told Marcus had died. Spencer was the one that killed him, but at the time, Bailey didn't know that. This news deeply saddened Brandon, and he fell into a deep depression. Marcus taught him everything he knew, brought him into the fold, and now, thanks to Spencer, not only did he separate the pair for 20 years, but killed one of them. Spencer also removed and erased Brandon's name from Umbrella's history, destroying Brandon's legacy. Around this time, he probably figured out what Spencer had done. By the time the lab was ordered to close in 1998, Bailey was a lost man that no longer cared about his own life's work. 20 years of his life dedicated to this no longer mattered, and he wasn't going to get any credit for it at all. Despite his sadness though, Bailey didn't go home. He used his old contacts to create a new organization, the Connections, a group in Germany that was against Umbrella. He stopped caring about eugenics and turned this group into a criminal organization that sold bioweapons. Spencer put a hit out on everyone who worked on the African lab to protect the secret of the progenitor virus. Albert Wesker later in 2006 started to look for survivors in that African base. He didn't find Brandon, and in Wesker's list you can find in Resident Evil 5, he put Brandon Bailey as deceased because nobody could find him, and to say that he's deceased is a justified assumption. However, as of 2017, after the events of Resident Evil 7, the BSAA tried to track down the Connections group. They discovered Brandon Bailey was the founder of this criminal organization. Although they didn't find the group, they weren't sure if Bailey was dead or alive. Now that you know everything about Brandon and the Connection story, let's talk about possible evidence. Evidence 1, the elderly man in Resident Evil 9's reveal trailer. Although there is no date of birth, we do know that he went to university in the 60s and took his first trip to Africa in 1966, which means by the time of 1960 he was already a full-grown adult. If Resident Evil 9 takes place in 2025, it's estimated he could be well in his 80s. Oswald Spencer died when he was 83 years old, which means that ironically Brandon could be about the same age or maybe even older than Oswald Spencer. And so I can see why a lot of people, when they saw that first reveal trailer, they believed this was Oswald Spencer. Now let's move on into some bigger evidence. Yes, the timelines match up, but I don't think that's enough. Let's talk about signs of the Mold Enemy 9. Now, the mold enemies are known for the black liquid that comes off of them. Miranda, who worked with the Connections group, provided them with the mold, and they together created the Eveline virus. However, the Connections at the end of Resident Evil 8 were still in control of the mold. They disappeared, yes, but they remain a threat. My evidence is that the hooded figure in the Gamescom trailer is infected with the mold. Now, look at his face, black ink dripping down his eyes. Does this remind you of anybody?
Let go!
I've spent a lifetime creating this moment, and you try to take it away from me. I will take what is due. My desires will be fulfilled! Rose is mine!
What the?
Yes, the black ink rolling down Mother Miranda's face. The signature black ink on molded enemies. The black ink all over the final battle arena. The black ink rolling down the eyes of the enemies in Resident Evil 9. It can't all be coincidence. To further connect this theory to other groups, remember the BSAA bioweapon? It also had the black ink around its eyes. Does this suggest the BSAA used the mold to create their own bioweapons? If you think about it, the BSAA are the ones responsible for containing the mold. Who's to say that they didn't get a virus of what Lucas Baker left over? In Resident Evil 7, the other BSAA besides Chris were human. Then at the end of Village, suddenly they have bioweapons and are using them instead of humans, with black ink around their eyes and the gray skin that matches the enemy in Resident Evil 9. When it comes to Resident Evil 7, Jack Baker and Margaret Baker's skin became the same skin tone as this creature. But they did not have these runny, teary black eyes as Miranda did and the hooded figure actually does. Maybe the more powerful you are with the mold, the more it starts to leak out of you. Mother Miranda's eyes were bleeding profusely. This hooded figure eyes are running down as well, and the BSAA bioweapon at the end of Resident Evil 8 all had this runny tear, so perhaps these things are far more powerful, which does make sense. The BSAA did deploy them and they did do massive damage. Between the sharing of the grayish skin tone, black tears coming out of their eyes, are these possible connections to Brandon Bailey's mold? And let's not forget, the mold kind of affects other people differently. Like Marguerite, she got the power to control bugs, while Jack had insane durability where even a bullet to the skull didn't even hurt him. Now, that is all I have for evidence, but let's go ahead and talk about why Brandon's inclusion just works. If Resident Evil 9 is truly this eulogy to the past, is supposed to be this tribute to a 30-year-long series, then Brandon's inclusion just kind of makes perfect sense. He is the last living founder of Umbrella. In terms of archetype, he is basically the new Spencer, right? The old guy who was obsessed with bioweapons for power. And to me personally, the Resident Evil mainline series is kind of broken up into trilogies. You have Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, which was the fall of Raccoon City and the lore of Umbrella. You have Resident Evil 4, 5, 6. In my mind, I call this the action era, and Las Plagas was featured in both Resident Evil 4 and 5. And then you have Resident Evil 7, 8, and 9, which would be a trilogy and the whole story of the Connections group and the mold. So not only does this close out the Connections storyline, it also closes out the Umbrella storyline at the same time. We know the story of all of the founders, right? We know the story of the Ashfords, we know the story of Spencer, we know these stories, but Brandon is the only story yet to be concluded out of that group. When it comes to the progenitor virus, Brandon worked on the progenitor virus for 20 years. He knows the ins and outs, and guess what? We're going to Raccoon City. If he decided to make Raccoon City his base of operations, it makes perfect sense. Maybe he's looking for traces of the T-virus. Maybe he wants the progenitor that's left somewhere in the city. It's also a massive callback to Resident Evil Outbreak File 1's ending, the ending where everybody sees that reveals that testing is still going on within Raccoon City. Brandon's inclusion makes sense on so many levels, story-wise, plot-wise, overall lore-wise. Brandon remains a shadow across the Resident Evil universe that can finally be settled now. I think if they do not include Brandon, that's a massive disappointment and an L, because they brought him back in Resident Evil 7, his group. What will be the point of bringing back Brandon if he wasn't going to play a significant role in the future Resident Evil games? That you're just gonna forget about him. Looking at you, Natalia, Alex Wesker over here. Or fuck, what about Jake Wesker? Or what about Sherry? I think they should stop, forgetting about these plot lines that they kind of set up, these characters that they set up, but they don't go back to. Loved or hated, you gotta complete the story eventually. And I think they should complete Brandon Bailey's story. Before I go into this video's conclusion, what would his motivations be? And I think it's possible he wants to be bigger than Umbrella ever was. Spencer's goal was to be a person who rules over an advanced race of humans, and to him, this is being a god. The mold can do that, right? The mold's main power is this mind control, that you can control people's actions. Imagine the power of the mold, not inside the mind of a little girl who wants a family, but inside the mind of a person who wants to become this ruler of everything, right? What's stopping him from infecting a large amount of people and being in control of them, of their actions, starting a massive army of BOW mold creatures that he can't control? Imagine the events of Resident Evil 7, except not on a little piece of land, but a huge worldwide scale. Brandon's mold can already do this, so he's already an extremely dangerous person. Perhaps he's looking for progenitor, and maybe if he mixed progenitor with his mold, bringing it together, combined with the unique daylight blood that's inside of Grace, maybe, just maybe, something catastrophic would happen. But that is a theory for another day. If Brandon truly is in the game, this story will make him a tragic villain, a man who loved his studies, surrounded by brilliant colleagues who all had a bright future, but now he's alone, a deeply scarred, angry old man who lost everything. But with his inclusion in this story, it's a finale in a way, the death of the final founder of Umbrella, the group that drove the world into darkness. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I love doing research and I love trying to put these little pieces together. It is actually really fun for me, to be honest. My next video will be about Las Plagas, but I need a little bit of a break before I do that. So make sure to subscribe for more Resident Evil content. Later.